Forge's scrolls are hard. Ink writhed on the scroll, coiling into a sigil warping the air. The Edric Covenant's shard pulsed alive, ancient, unspoken. To read it was to unmake. The Aurbis held its breath. Forge's scrolls are heart, not parchment, coiling into a sigil warping the air. They are fractured vows of the Edric Covenant, ink bleeding like dried blood across Daedric-treated vellum. Each edge hums with latent power, a half-erased sigil. To unroll one breaches a conditional clause, spoken words fray the Aurbis's bindings. Scholars tracing Shivering Isles scrolls vanished mid-sentence, their names excised from all records. The Covenant's terms were never fully writtenly fragmented, scattered, waiting. A terms were never misread fully phrased could trigger written on lie a fragmented clause older than time. Aurbis is not a world. It is a promise, promises once broken, unmake everything. The convention of stars was no mere assembly. It was a cosmic forge where Idra etched binding clauses into the Elder Scrolls Covenant to knit the Aurbis from chaos. These were not records, they were locks, seals, equations that held the dream of creation together. They were Marakati locks, selective seals, held to their dream of dragon creation together breaks not acts of war but surgical fractures. The Middle Dawn shuddered as clauses splintered, shards embedding in stone, blood, and time. Some fragments sleep. Others pulse, waiting to recalibrate or unravel. Scholars call them relics, they are thresholds. A phrase misread in a dusty script could ignite a clause older than the elder gods. The Aurbis breathes through these scars. Every scroll you touch is a thread in a net that holds galaxies. Some threads glow, some bleed. And some, when woven again, might stitch a new covenant or let the promise die. Every scroll you read is a shard of the divine pact that binds the Aurbis, and some fragments are still active. To unroll the vellum is to let ink seep into blood, not memory. The words do not describe reality. They reshape it. A scholar who deciphers a clause does not learn a truth become its vessel. The towers tremble when the Aurbis shifts. What happens when the covenant's edge is honed? A correctly woven clause might mend a fraying plane, realign a star's orbit, hush a dying god's whisper. Misread. The ink bleeds backward, the towers which prop up reality fracture. A single misaligned glyph could unmake the Aurbis. The Moth priests know this. They pore over fragments not to preserve history, but to smother sparks before they ignite. Their eyes hollow. Their hands forget their own names. The Covenant does not study its vessels, it colonizes them. Some scrolls hold clauses that, if triggered, could unmake the Aurbis, not destroy, unmake. As though the Aurbis had never been, a tower cracks, dust rains from its height. The Moth priests pray to the gaps between words. They know the net is not a shelter. It is a wound, and every reader is a needle, threading a new suture or cutting the last. Vivek stood amid the ash of the red year, his hands trembling as he unrolled the first scroll. The towers of Almalexia crumbled behind him, their stones weeping molten light. He spoke the words not as a king, but as a scribe of grief, binding the covenant's shards to mortar and bone. The scrolls did not rebuild, they remembered asterisk, and what is remembered does not stay dead. Across the ages, a clause slumbered in the frost of the throat of the world. When the throat cracked, bleeding wind and war, Alduin's name stirred in the ink. A scholar in the college had traced the sigil a single line in a scroll's margin, a promise of return. The dragon's rise was no accident, it was a rehearsal asterisk. The civil war below raged unaware, while the sky itself became a page turning. The Dwemer of Markarth carved their last words into the iron of Numidium. You have seen their cities hollowed as husks, their forges cold. Yet in their final hours they did not die. They unmade themselves, threading the fragments into gears and glyphs, becoming something the Aurbis could not unmake. Or could not contain their transcendence was not escape. It was a footnote in the Covenant's margin, a proof of concept. Tiber Septim's blade drank the blood of 3 crowns, but the true conquest was the scroll he pocketed at the Battle of the White Stone. Its claws burned in his palm, a promise of unity. Yet Kagranak's experiment shattered that vow, scattering the words like embers. The empire he forged was a shadow of the Pact's edges, fraying where the true text had been torn away. Each wielder became a suture or a blade. The scrolls do not grant power, they assign blame asterisk. Vivek's towers, Alduin's sky, the Dwemer's void, Tiber's empire, each a wound dressed in history. And now your hands reach for the next fragment. Can you bear the weight of a clause you cannot yet read? The Aurbis does not forgive misread lines. It asterisk erases asterisk. Each scroll hums with the Godhead's forgotten whisper sync that bleeds not words, but will. To unseal a fragment is to rewrite the Aurbis's dream mid-sleep. The parchment glows not as artifact but as wound. What clause have you already broken? The covenant's gaps hunger. The Aurbis does not erasate rewrites. The covenant was no mere accord. It was a paradox woven into each clause, a thread of the Godhead's dream, each scroll a splinter of that weave. The Idra and Daedra did not bargain, they entangled. Their words became the Aurbis sinews, a lattice of contradictions, order and decay, creation and collapse. To raid these fragments is to tug at the weave. The Moth priests knew this. Their hunger to decipher the red year scars awakened echoes that shattered Vivardenfell. Martin Septim's ascension did not end the Oblivion crisis, it fulfilled a clause, a sentence buried in the Covenant's fevered script. His body became the Aurbis punctuation, a period in a sentence that still bleeds. The towers are not stone. They are the Covenant's exhalation, reality's scaffolding built from its contradictions. Each pulse of their light is a clause unbroken, but the clauses are breaking. The white gold concordat, that brittle piece, was a desperate rewrite, a mortal attempt to suture the Aurbis wounds. It held for an age. Now the great war's ash has loosened the ink. Heroes are not saviors. They are the Covenant scribes, their choices appending clauses no god can foresee. A blade raised in war. A crown claimed in blood. Each act is a new line in the dream, and the Aurbis rewrites itself in real time. The towers tremble, their light dims where the clauses fray. What remains when the last thread snaps? Not oblivion. Not nothing, a rewrite. The Aurbis does not it becomes, and you, reader, have already begun the becoming. The scrolls do not record history. They are the history, still bleeding ink into the void. What clause will you trigger next? The Aurbis waits, it always has. They are not relics, not artifacts, shards of a shattered vow scattered across the Aurbis. The Moth priests guard their secrets in shadowed towers. The Dwemer ruins cradle fragments still humming with unspent power. Some scrolls burn cold in the hands of thieves, their ink coiled like serpents waiting to strike. To write is to awaken is to unweave. The Covenant's clauses sleep in every line, conditions unmet, penalties unpaid. A single phrase misread could fracture a plane. A single name spoken might undo a god's work. The Aurbis does not forgive breaches, it never has. The last hero who sought to bind the scrolls vanished, their voice the final echo in a collapsing star. Now the Moth priests whisper, now the ruins tremble. What clause lies dormant in your hands? What price will the Aurbis demand? The Moth priests do not read the scrolls. They cradle them, whispering counterincantations to stabilize the glyphs that writhe like trapped starlight. Each fragment is a clause in the Aurbis's birth, contract a language where syntax is law and punctuation bends space. To study them is to tamper with the scaffolding of paradox. The scroll's edges fray with divine code, its inks bleeding alchemical equations that once balanced creation's scales. A scholar in Alienor once transcribed a single line. The library collapsed into a Klein bottle, its patrons trapped in recursive time. The Covenant is not a relic, it is a living ledger, its debts unpaid. Every name etched into the Aurbis becomes a liability, a signature on a loan that accrues interest in souls. The scrolls are both testament and termination clause. To read is to inherit is to activate. And somewhere in the silence between stars, the Moth priests wait for the next clause to unravel. What name have you claimed? What collapse have you signed? What if the words you trace are traps, each glyph a lever, each verse a trigger? The Elder Scrolls do not record historicity, enforce the First Covenant's shattered will. No scholar has mapped the full covenantly fragments remain, each a thread in reality's weave. To read is to activate is to unmake. The towers still hold, but cracks hum with the weight of unspoken clauses.